Hi and welcome to another Tech Tuesday. Today I'm going to show you the comparison between the three mats and mice combinations here that I've got. On the left, we have the Logitech G903 with the Powerplay mat. In the middle, we've got the Razer Hyperflux with the Mamba mouse. And on the right, we've got the Corsair DarkCore SE with the QI MM1000 mouse mat. So if you're not familiar with my Tech Tuesday series, I look at gaming peripherals. On there, I do pros and cons. I'll tell you some of the specification, but you can find most of that on the internet, so I'm not going to go through too much of the detail. And in today's one, we're going to compare the differences in these mice. I won't go into too much of the detail of the spec of the mice. I've done individual videos on those that I'll put the links in the description below if you want to see more specifics on them. This will just be the differences between them. I'll give my view on which one I think you should get and what my decisions are around that. So let's start off with the weight of the mice. This is quite common. If you're not sure what these mice are, these are wireless charging mice that charge using the mats. And they are using the new latest wireless technology. And they're a lot more accurate and very, very difficult if you can tell the difference between these wireless ones and the wired ones. It's now starting to bring the gap between wireless and wired very close together. I think maybe unless you're a super pro, you probably wouldn't notice. I know I can't notice, and I play quite a lot. And I can't tell the difference really anymore, whereas prior to that I could do with the original mice like the Mamba and the Lancehead. So let's start with the first comparison here. This is going to be the weight of these mice. So we'll start off with the heaviest first, which is the DarkCore from Corsair, and this comes in at 137 grams, 138 grams with the additional pinky slider. This is quite a heavy mouse. This is what they generally were around in weight-wise. The next two are much lighter. So going on to the next heaviest one, which is the Logitech 903 here. This comes in at 110 grams and has an additional weight that you can put in it as an additional 10 grams as well. This is getting into the much lighter area now. It's still a little bit heavy for some people. Some people prefer them to be 90 to 80 grams, and this one's still a little bit heavy, but it's certainly getting there now. So the final one being the Razer Hyperflux, this comes in to be the lightest. This comes in at 97 grams, and this is getting to be a good weight here for a mouse. It's certainly light. It's not the lightest on the market. That's something like the G305 or maybe now the G Wireless Pro. But I haven't reviewed that yet, but I will be doing soon. And, 97 grams is quite a light mouse, and you can certainly tell that difference on here. So out of the weight ones, if you want the lightest mouse, you want the Hyperflux here, Mamba from Razer. Let's get into the next thing, connectivity and the portability. Razer Hyperflux tied to the mats for the wireless charging. They charge off the mat, but when they're not on the mat, they have to be wired using the USB cable. They can't be wireless. Logitech 903 or 703, depending which one you've got. And it has a wireless dongle, which is good. So if you're on the move and you're gaming or you're on business or whatever you want to do, you can plug the dongle in the side of the laptop and the mouse remains wireless. So now the DarkCore here from Corsair has a slightly advantage over them here where it comes with Bluetooth connectivity. The other two do not. And it has a wireless dongle, which is good. So if you're on the move and you're gaming or you're on business or whatever you want to do, you can plug the dongle in the side of the laptop and the mouse remains wireless. It can also be charged off the cable as well. So that is certainly an advantage here on the Corsair side. The Logitech and the Razer mats here are using a new technology for wireless charging. They're using some kind of magnetic charge. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but what this gives you is the ability to charge across the entire mat. Whereas the Corsair has a slight disadvantage here where it's a QI charger and it only charges in the top right-hand corner. So when the mouse is being used, the Corsair one, it's not charging necessarily, but the Razer and the Logitech ones are. So while you're gaming, the mice are still charging. The Corsair has an advantage here that you can QI charge things like your phone on the mat. The other two you can't. Although this sounds a great idea, unless you're not going to be at your desk using your PC, I think it's a little bit pointless because when I'm on my PC, I want the full range of the mat, and the phone would have to be on the mat to charge. Just come with an adapter if you haven't got QI charging, and that plugs into the base of the phone. But overall, it's a good feature, but I don't think you're really going to use it. So let's get into the size of the mice here and give you an idea of what the dimensions are of these mice. The Logitech comes in at a length of 129.5 millimeters in length. These are only approximate sizes, by the way. So I've measured them here to give you an idea, a bit more accurate, hopefully. The front width is 59.5 millimeters, and the rear of the mouse is 66.5 millimeters. The front depth is 25.5 millimeters, and the rear depth is 39.5 millimeters. So moving on to the Hyperflux, the length of the Hyperflux is 125.3 millimeters. The front width is 65.5 millimeters. The back is 70 millimeters. The front depth is 26.6 millimeters. And the back depth is 41.8 millimeters. Final one here, the Corsair, comes in at a length of 126.7 millimeters. The front width is 56.5 millimeters. The rear width is 58.8 millimeters. And the width with the plate in the middle comes in at 80.8 millimeters. The front depth comes in at a slim 17.8 millimeters, and the rear is 42.5 millimeters. From the dimensions, these all seem very, very similar sizes, but they're all different shapes here. I think you have to try and pick and choose which shape fits for your hand. They're all similar length. It really will come down to the style of the mouse that you prefer. The 903 from Logitech is ambidextrous. The Razer's right-handed, and so is the Corsair. So it really has to come down to which shape fits your hand, really. So going back to the mats here, the Corsair mat is a hard mat. It only comes as a hard mat. You can't change it, which is a bit of a shame because it's also the thickest mat and also comes in the mid-range of the size. The Razer Hyperflux has the ability to be able to flip the mat over, which is good. So you can have a cloth and a hard version. And the Logitech here has exactly the same. You've got a soft side and a hard side. Two differences really. I'm not even going to go into the Corsair here. It's a hard mat. It's like the MM800. If you've not seen that, I'll put a link in the description. It's very, very similar. But the main difference on these mats is the ability to flip them over, and also that the Razer one has an inset kind of ledge built into it, I guess you could call it, where the mat is secure so it doesn't slide about, a bit like the SteelSeries QCK Prism. And the Logitech doesn't. It sits on like a rubber mat. And what I found with the Logitech when I'm using it is that the mat does move around a little bit, and I'm forever readjusting the mat. It only moves about an inch maybe. It's not like sliding around while you're gaming, but it does move over an extended gaming period, should we say. The Razer doesn't do this, and for me that makes the Razer probably the better mat in terms of stability and it moving about. It's also got a lot better rubber feet. It is very, very secure, the Razer mat. Okay, so let's talk about the mat dimensions, because it's not only about what the type of mat it is, it also comes into the size of the mat. And this is also key for a lot of people, including myself. So the Hyperflux comes in at a length of 244 millimeters in length. If you include the brick, it's 285 millimeters. The first dimension here is the playable mat distance, just to make that clear. It's got a width of 350 millimeters. It's 5 millimeters deep. And the brick height is 15 millimeters. The Logitech comes in at 180 millimeters in length. If you include the brick, it's 320 millimeters. The width of it is 345 millimeters. The depth is 5 millimeters. The brick height is 13 millimeters. We move on to the Corsair. This comes in at 260 millimeters. Including the brick, it's 290 millimeters. The width is 352 millimeters. The depth is 8 millimeters. And the brick is 25 millimeters. So reviewing all those dimensions, that means the Logitech is the biggest playable area. Coming slightly behind that is the Corsair, and then the Razer comes in behind that. The biggest brick here is by far the Corsair's one. Again, they put a massive brick on it, but it does have a USB pass-through if that's useful to you. And it's also offset to the left, which is good. The other disadvantage with that is that you've got a very thick cable. I'm talking 4 times the thickness of the other 2 cables, which makes it very inflexible. It's a little bit shorter, and it requires 2 USB ports. The Razer and Logitech come with braided cables as well. These all do come with braided cables, but these are much thinner. The Razer has the longest one at over 2 meters, and the Logitech's not far behind that. They all have these USB blocks on them. The Razer has some tapered edges. Logitech's is to the left. Corsair's is to the left, but it's like a towering sky block. To be fair, because these are built for wireless mouse, you don't really notice it and it doesn't actually cause you a problem. But if you're going to use a wired mouse on that, it's something to consider here. So for me, this is where I get a bit of a dilemma on which one to decide. On the Logitech, matte is much better for me, even though it moves. I wish it had some kind of edges in it that would hold it in place. It does have a slight lip, but it just certainly doesn't hold it in place. The Razer matte for me just isn't long enough. I'd like it to have a bit more length. And I always find I do tend to bottom out at the top. I guess you could top out, bottom out. I hit the USB block sometimes, and that's a little bit annoying for me. And of course, that mat's quite well-rounded, but the thickness of it to me, because it's the thickest mat here, and that USB block and the cable just put me off the mat totally. So the other thing about the mats here is RGB. The Corsair has no RGB on the mat whatsoever. The mouse has RGB lighting though on the rear logo, the front, and on the thumb press button, which is nice. The Corsair mouse does have the nicest RGB, I reckon, on the mouse itself. It's a shame the mat doesn't have any, because it's certainly big enough to have it. The Razer mat has about 80 to 90% RGB coverage, exactly the same as a Firefly. It goes all the way around the bottom, the sides, and doesn't quite cover the top. And it has a charging light in the middle of the Razer logo that can change color and be turned off. And the Logitech has only RGB on the logo itself on top of the USB block. So if you want RGB, the Razer Mamba here is probably the one. The Hyperflux mouse has RGB on the scroll wheel and on the rear logo. The Logitech mouse only has RGB on the rear logo as well. So build quality on these mice, I think the Mamba comes in probably top trumps here because it's got rubber on both the left and right side of the mouse. The one thing I was disappointed with the Logitech 903 is that it has no rubber parts. It's made out of quite a hard plastic, and it was one of the concerns I had when I first reviewed it, is that it feels quite cheap for the price given how much it was. And the Corsair comes mid-range. It's got a little bit of rubber, not quite as much as you'd expect. It could do a little bit more on the sides, but it's fairly well built, and it's got a nice kind of rippled back on it as well for being secure in your hand. Out of all these mice, none of them really move out your hands. The Logitech might slip maybe a little bit if you get a bit sweaty, but to be fair, it's still pretty good, even though it's got no decent rubber. So going around cost here, I've not really touched cost because these are all very, very similar prices. They're all around $250 when they were new. They're dropping down to $220, maybe a little bit less now. So price-wise, they're all very similar, to be fair. There's no major differences here. Expect to pay a lot of money for these mice and their combination with the mouse mat as well. So which one am I going to pick here? And this is where I have a bit of a dilemma still, is the Corsair to me is out. I've never particularly been a fan of that Corsair. DarkCore and the mat to me just put me straight off. So for me, the Corsair isn't the mouse for me. I'm not saying that isn't for everybody else. I think if you have a nice Corsair setup, it would look nice, but for me, it doesn't work. So I'm stuck between the Logitech and the Razer Hyperflux. And they both have their pros and cons. So the mats are, good, but one's a bit short, one moves around, one's got RGB lighting, and one doesn't particularly. One goes with my Razer setup at the minute, one doesn't. And I can't really decide. The mice themselves are both very good. I like the Logitech 903 shape potentially. Originally, I didn't find it very heavy, but now I feel like it is because I've been using the Hyperflux. But I do prefer the shape of the 903. I also prefer the buttons on the 903 on the side of it. And I wish the Razer Mamba here had more buttons. So I'm a little bit stuck. I can't actually decide which one I prefer. So let me know in the comments which one you would pick. If I had to pick at the minute, it would probably be the Razer Hyperflux, purely because it goes with my setup, not because I prefer it over the Logitech, because to me they're both very good and I can't really decide. Thanks for watching this video. If you want to see some more, hit the like button, let me know in the comments what you want to see. Check out my Thrift Thursday for some more budget gaming stuff, not this premium end stuff that is probably overpriced, to be fair. And I'll see you all again. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.